Okay, welcome everybody. Welcome from Southwest Michigan. My name is Josh Haas. I'm the Vice Chair for the Hawk Migration Association of North America, and super excited to welcome you again for another month in our Lunch and Learn series. So today we're going to kind of change things up a little bit. We have multiple speakers that we're excited to welcome here today from the Raptor ID group on Facebook that has grown to a pretty staggering amount of group members, which just tells us how difficult identifying raptors truly is. So we did have Raptor ID last month, which was a great precursor, more of a high level overview of the more popular species in mid to late migration in fall. And I think that's probably setting a good stage for this afternoon. So just a few administrative things. As you know, many of you are used to, you're not able to unmute yourself. That is on purpose. So what we want you to do is go to the bottom of Zoom and please pop open that chat window and engage with us. Tell us where you're calling in from, maybe where your closest migration site is, where you like to Hawkwatch. And also make sure to leave that open and use that for asking questions. So I'm going to gather all the questions throughout the presentation. And after the speakers are complete, I will facilitate asking those questions to the speakers at the end. So please engage with us and ask us those questions as they proceed today. Also, if you're not happy with your current view on Zoom, make sure you pop up to the top right-hand corner and you can click view and choose some of the options there to dial it in exactly how you want it. Other than that, I think we'll go ahead and get started, give the speakers as much time as possible. And so today I'm excited to welcome Brian Rusnica, Cathy Sheeter, Lindsay Dunham, and Bonnie Cleaver. And just a special thanks from all of us at Humana to all four of these folks who have taken the time to build this presentation together, and especially Brian Rusnica for always being such a great partner to Humana. So with that, Brian, I'll hand it over to you.
Thanks so much, Josh. Really appreciate it. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I think we've got a great program. And, as Josh mentioned, our group is really a community of members. And we think this is a great time to celebrate the fact that we've hit 20,000 participants and just introduce ourselves and why we think the group is important and one of our favorite places on the internet to spend time. And I think undoubtedly one of the best resources to identify birds that you have questions about or have discussions about behavior. So we just love to introduce ourselves and the group and share some of the things that we've learned and kind of go from there. Just to sort of set the stage, what is the Raptor ID group? We're a Facebook group, and we are solely focused on the identification of North American raptors. We are free to join, and most importantly, I think here is that all learning levels are welcome. So we have, the whole gambit from, cell phone pics of backyard birds that are confusing to advanced discussions about subspecies, hybridization, or abnormal pigmentation. We really have a little bit of everything, and it's a great place to practice for all levels of learning. This is our 8th year. The group was founded in 2015. Along the way, we've collected endorsements from Humana and also from Hawkwatch International. And those are, it's such a huge part of our sort of mission to align with organizations that really promote the conservation of raptors, and we thank our friends at Humana for, again, the opportunity to talk with you today. One thing about our group is that we try to make sure that all of our posts have date and location, and also that all of our identifications have rationale in the form of relevant field marks. So part of our job as admins is just making sure that we keep the group between the lines in terms of, enforcing those guidelines and making sure that every post and every identification is clear and worth it for our learners to view. We definitely have behavioral discussions, And if folks are observing interesting things in the field, we love to talk about them. And folks in the community are super excited to share what they've learned and their anecdotes. And again, what's an admin? What do? We moderate the content of the group to avoid irrelevant things and maintain a positive community. Essentially, we're there to keep the conversation focused. We really focus on identification. So that's just part of the admin's job, is to make sure the conversations stay there. And we love the amount and quality of content that we get from our members every day. The group is really about the members. And again, 20,000 is such a great milestone to celebrate. I want to be super clear about what our role is here as admins. We don't identify the birds in the group. We have a community, and the community sources those identifications. While we participate plenty, anybody in the group can identify a bird, and that sense of togetherness and collaboration is really drives everything. In the group, you'll find in those 20,000 members, professionals from all over the world of ornithology, and specifically raptors. We've got field biologists, we've got students, authors and researchers participate all the time. We've got great engagement from the wildlife rehabilitation and veterinary communities. We see a lot of posts about birds that have been brought in for trauma or illness that are treated. Also, a huge part of our community are Hawkwatch counters. I'm one of those. And we see all sorts of interesting ID questions come from Hawkwatch sites, especially Hamana sites in North America. And some folks are simply photographers and may have questions about the birds that they're seeing in their camera. We love to help folks out there. The falconry community is a huge part of the group, including our admins. We've got multiple falconers among us. And the general birder, I think, has a lot to gain from being a part of our group, because raptors are included in some of the birds that they're seeing and they're struggling to identify. So we're always happy to help the birding community. And finally, some folks are only in it to just identify a single bird, and you know what, that's great too, and we love to help them out. And that thirst for knowledge is shared among all 20,000 of us. So we're super happy to help them out. All right, I'm going to pass it over to Cathy to talk about our next part of the presentation here, the history and evolution of the group.
So Hawkwatch, our group, our Raptor ID group, initially started out, you want to go to the next slide for me, Brian, please? Started out called Hawk ID Group, and it was kind of a spin-off of Riff Raff Hawkwatch group that some of our members, or some of the members that were in Riff Raff, were really starting to delve into some depth within our conversation, in particular subspecies identifications of red-tailed hawks. And Pete Gustus, who runs Riff Raff, said, I'd really prefer these conversations kind of be on their own group. And so he actually started the group and then took himself off as an admin and left a few of us that were into these deeper conversations as admins. In the very early days of our Hawk ID group was predominantly more advanced birders that wanted to get into the nitty gritty intricacies. But as the group has grown, of course, now with 20,000 people of all these different skill levels, we have a lot of just general identification questions, but we do still occasionally get conversations that are a little more in depth about aging birds, molt sequencing, and specific subspecies IDs. So that was back in January of 2015. And then later in the year, in December of 2015, Jerry Liguori, who had avoided Facebook for a long time, got on Facebook. And all of our admin that were currently there were very good friends with Jerry, and he was a mentor for pretty much all of us. And so he came on the admin team and was able to get the Hawkwatch International and the Humana endorsements that our group now proudly wears. In 2016, the Raptor ID app was launched, and that was a fabulous resource, though, even though our names are currently the same, are not directly affiliated with one another. So of course, Liguori and Sullivan launched that Raptor ID app that has great videos and all different plumage and age identification. So we use that a lot as a resource and encourage our members to use that as a wonderful resource for the app to help enhance their learning from our group. So in 2017, we changed one of our rules pretty substantially that I think really improved the quality of our group. And that was that instead of just randomly throwing out an identification of Cooper's hawk, sharpshin hawk, etc., Now our members had to specifically mention why they thought it was a particular identification. And we really encourage them to use more than a single field mark, but sometimes they don't. But we do encourage them to say, you know, oh, ferruginous hawk because of the feathered legs and the gape that comes underneath the eye and the very broad chest. And so instead of just a random name being given, we were aiding in the education of each of our members, especially through repetition of seeing these field marks by these more advanced birders used again and again and again. And it started to hopefully implement into their brain of why they were coming to that identification instead of just spitting a name out, which doesn't really help with learning. So in 2018, we kind of crowdsourced within our membership and said, hey, we're identifying owls. We occasionally get vultures in the group. Falcons, of course, don't really fit under the heading of hawk specifically either. Should we rename ourselves to Raptor ID? And they almost unanimously said yes. And so we made a change to the group's name from Hawk ID to Raptor ID, which is the name that we still currently use. For several years, we didn't make any dramatic changes. And then at the end of 2020, Brian started tagging these posts that were relevant with specific keywords. So you can now search, for example, Cooper's hawk, and it will bring up all the posts that involve Cooper's hawks, or maybe not all, but many, many posts that involve these various headings. Or if you want to see abnormal plumages, we have various topics that you can kind of search the group more efficiently than just using the general search function, using the pound key and then various topics. And then we kind of did some just minor reformulation of the rules and guidelines to make them more consistent later in 2021. And that's where we kind of currently sit with the group, and it continues to grow and expand. And I think that in particular, the requiring field marks has really made our group stand above practically any other identification group on Facebook. And I get comments all the time that they wish there was a warbler group, or they wish there was a sparrow group that required these field identifications for learning purposes. So this one's pretty self-explanatory, shows our growth over the years. So you can see that it's pretty much just been a steady incline. Sometimes we kind of get a spurt where our group gets promoted on a post, or what's that bird or something like that, or somebody comments, and then we all of a sudden get a big jump of people joining. But as you can see, it's been pretty much just a steady incline from the get-go. So the very first admins that were added by Pete Gustus were Rick, Tammy Maffett, who unfortunately is no longer on Facebook, and myself. And then Jerry joined in December of 2015, and obviously his name was obviously a big draw for many members to join our group. And he was a mentor, as I mentioned, for all of us. So we miss him a great deal in our group. And then our more recent admins, Brian came on in 2017, Lindsay joined in April 2018, and Bonnie is our newest addition in December of 2020. All do fabulous work and help run the group smoothly. So I did a lot of talking here already, but my name is Cathy Sheeter. I live most of the year in Colorado and part of the year in Arizona. I guess a few of my endorsements is that I'm on the Colorado State Rare Bird Committee since 2021. I spent 3 years living in New Jersey and was a volunteer Hawkwatch counter at State Line Hawkwatch from 2015 to 2018. I've done a little bit of guiding, just kind of privately, and I'm just a nature lover, spend a lot of time out doing photography. I work full-time as an artist, and I was a guest author on Jerry's personal blog several times with some of the neat red tails and a really neat abnormal plumage Swainson's hawk that I had in Colorado.
Thanks, Cathy. Another one of the founding admins was Rick Bacher. Rick is unable to join us today due to a family issue, and we're sending our thoughts out to Rick. Rick lives in upstate New York. Out there, he's a guided naturalist. He's worked with the Tift Preserve and participates in the Allegheny Nature Pilgrimage, and also has worked with Buffalo Audubon. He's counted birds at the Hamburg, New York Hawkwatch site. He's a raptor educator with Sky Hunters USA. Also, Rick did some banding as an assistant in Cape May over the years. He's currently a licensed falconer and is also a great photographer. Myself, I'm Brian Rusnica. I'm coming to you from Cambridge, Mass. Other hawk-related activities that I participate in. I'm currently the president and a board member of Eastern Mass Hawkwatch. That's a group of about 200 of us. in Eastern Massachusetts that run various Hawkwatch sites across that part of the state. I actually count at Mount Watatic, which is a fall site up on the New Hampshire border, and also volunteer weekends at our spring site at Plum Island, Massachusetts. I'm additionally a board member of Northeast Hawkwatch. That's a regional Hawkwatch collective with folks that span from New Brunswick to New Jersey. And I've been on there for a few years, and we host, every 4 years, we host a regional conference. I've led workshops and presented for groups like Mass Audubon and the Mount Auburn Cemetery here in Cambridge. And also a photographer. I've had some images in Cornell's Living Bird, the Globe, and recently in the Rosenfield book, The Cooper's Hawk.
Thanks, Brian. Hi, I'm Lindsay Dunham. I'm located here in Clearwater, Florida. A couple of my things about myself are I used to be a board member for the Clearwater Audubon Society, and I was also a volunteer. I've been kind of a guide and naturalist with the Clearwater Audubon as well, leading some of their nature walks, bird walks, and I've done a couple of talks for them about Raptor ID. I have been a zookeeper for a little bit over 6 or 7 years. I'm also a falconer, and I also enjoy photography.
Hi, I'm Bonnie Cleaver, and I'm here in Fort Collins, Colorado. I work for the Rocky Mountain Raptor program as their education avian coordinator. So I kind of oversee all of our education ambassador raptors that we take to school programs and other outreach events to do education programs about birds of prey in the area. I've been a volunteer with the Raptor program starting in 2003. So I've been with the Rocky Mountain Raptor program for almost 20 years now, and was hired on as staff about a decade ago. I was also a volunteer with the Denver Zoo for a long time, and I'm also an artist, and I was a graphic designer for a while.
Awesome. Thanks, folks. Well, so nice again to have a chance to introduce ourselves to this audience and to our members. And we really appreciate working with everybody. I want to talk a little bit about group foundations and kind of the principles that we use to kind of describe and outline our approach to identification. So I'll turn this over to Lindsay.
Hi again. So the first thing that we want to talk about here is obviously one of our rules is to provide, why you are identifying a bird as you are. And some of the best ways to do that obviously is providing field marks. So I'm going to define some field marks for you. Field mark is a differentiating characteristic between birds. Every species that we look at in North America has different sets of field marks that set them apart from other species. Some species will share field marks, so you can't just use just that one. Like you can't say, oh, this bird has feathers, therefore it's a red tail. Obviously, all birds have feathers. These field marks that we usually work with in the photos that we have on Raptor ID are going to be probably different than your in-hand field marks. Obviously, we're looking at things like belly bands, plumage, flight style, shape, structure, everything like this. Whereas in-hand field marks are often looking at wing cord lengths, tarsi, diameter, stuff like that. So obviously from these photos, we're not getting those wing cord lengths, so we have to go off of other things. We're primarily looking at the shape, structure, flight style, and plumage of these birds. One thing that we do like to remind our members is that size is a pretty unreliable field mark when it comes to photos. This is because a lot of times we'll get photos of just a bird in a blue sky, and there's literally nothing to compare it with. So you can't say, oh, well, I can see that this bird is big, so it's a bald eagle. We want to see things that, really define why this bird is what it is, not just it's big or it's small. We also want to consider the range and habitat that this bird was in, as well as the location. Obviously We're not going to be married to its range and habitat all the time because birds can fly and they can go wherever they want. But, if you see a bird photoed out in the middle of the desert, you might want to consider being like, oh, why is this not a snowy owl? Because it's in the desert. But sometimes they show up there. So other skills that we like to make sure people understand is that there's a difference between the photo identification and field identification. There are some things that you're only going to get in the field, and there are some things that help you identify with like just a photo capture. It allows you to, really go over that image with a fine-tooth comb, whereas sometimes in the field you only get like 2 seconds, and that field identification skill is really important. So we also want to encourage our members to think like students and not like experts. I believe personally, and I think we all in the admin team believe that there's always going to be something new that we can learn from about raptors from not only our members, but the admin team and books and everybody around us. And another important thing is that nobody can identify every single bird that comes through our page. Whoops, I think I accidentally closed everything. Okay. Not everybody can identify every single bird. Did I leave the Hold on. Can you guys still hear me?
You're good.
I can't see. I closed something on my page, but I'll just keep talking. Nobody can identify every single bird, but it is super fun to try. There are exceptions to every single rule. So when I personally comment, I try not to say always and never. We try to say, we typically see this, or we usually see this, or oftentimes a bird is going to show X, Y, and Z. Again, I'm going to mention that birds do have wings. So the expected range is super helpful when we identify a bird, but vagrant sightings happen every day, and we'll talk about some of those later. So yeah, that's what I have.
Awesome.
And then I'll just add the last one, that Jerry always encouraged us to always question known information, because our understanding and the study is always ongoing. And there may be current information that we tout as, that a lot of people tout as fact, and then over time and generations we learned that what we thought was accurate, like that all dark birds maybe were westerns. Now we're continuing that study and trying to learn more about whether some of these dark birds maybe aren't always westerns. With red tails, sorry, should specify dark red tails. And
Sure.
Our study is always ongoing.
Perfect. I just want to mention to folks, you'll see some links in the presentation here. We're going to make this available for folks afterwards. And if you want to click through, we're linking up some materials from Hawkwatch International and from Hamana that will be helpful to go through. This case, here's a link to one of Jerry's blogs. All right, and we'll pass it over to Bonnie.
Great. Another few things that we like people to look at are things like learning the basics well before trying to get into the small minutia of Raptor ID and the little nuancy kind of things, especially for people that are starting out and learning Raptor ID. It can be very overwhelming. So sometimes I see where people get kind of hung up on one field ID mark or one trait, and they're trying to figure out, is it this one particular species because I'm seeing one thing? It's a lot easier to start off with learning overall shape, body proportions, plumage styles, and flight styles, because that will help you narrow things down and make your options a lot easier to weed through when you're looking at more of the minutia things later. And there's some good links there from the Raptor ID app and Jerry Liguori's approach to things. There are also a lot of times, especially if you're out in the field and you see a bird soaring overhead or flying through an area, you may not be able to see something for very long or with very much detail. And we even see that in photos sometimes when people post something like a picture they took from their cell phone, where you can kind of see the shape of the bird and maybe kind of what color it is, but you're not going to be able to see, really fine details or small traits that you would be able to see. So you can kind of weed down from there. Some other foundations that we have in our group are basically clearing up some things to keep everybody on the same page. So a lot of these things are like using aging systems that make sense to everybody. And there's a good link for that one too. So generally we ask people to use things like juvenile and adult for talking about birds that have a specific juvenile plumage and then they molt into a different adult plumage. So things like red-tailed hawks or Cooper's hawks fall into that group. And then only using things like first year, second year, immature plumages for birds that have more than 2 plumage classes. So things like bald eagles and Swainson's hawks fall into those groups, because then you can pick out, you know, is this a 2-year-old bird versus a 3-year-old bird? And you can kind of see those based on which plumage class they're in. Yeah, lots of different terminology works at play. Talked a little bit about avoiding using other systems. So things like falconry terminology, things like passage or haggard get thrown in there sometimes. But if you're not a falconer, those are not going to be terms that are, you know, things that you've heard of before. So they can be very confusing, which is why we try to stick to things like juvenile and adult instead. And then limiting use of banding codes. There are a lot of people in our group, myself included, at the Rocky Mountain Raptor program where I work. We use the 4-letter abbreviations all the time, every day. However, if you're not a bander or you don't work with birds specifically, those things are a whole new ballpark to learn. So we try to avoid that in our group just to make it easy for everybody. So using species names rather than SWHA for Swainson's hawk. And also avoiding using colloquial names because those can get very confusing. I see that a lot in other groups that pop up. So those are going to be things like not calling red-tailed hawks chicken hawks, or not calling American kestrels sparrow hawks, because kestrels are not a hawk, they're a falcon, and sparrowhawk is a name for another species in another part of the world. So especially because we do have group members from Europe and Asia, if people are throwing around words like buzzard for vultures or sparrowhawk for kestrels, it gets really, really confusing for people in the comments. So we want people to stick to species names rather than colloquial names.
Quickly before we go on, I saw somebody had put a question about whether we allow the word subadult. And yes, for appropriate species like Swainson's hawks that are in between a juvenile and an adult plumage, we do allow the use of subadult. And we're a little careful about first year, second year. We don't use it in the sense of a bander that is January 1st, they become second year. We're using it more in the preference of juvenile, the full time that they retain their juvenile plumage, subadult the whole time of the second year. And so we don't automatically make a bird a second year bird on January 2nd or January 1st. Go ahead. Sorry.
Is that one still me?
Yep.
Okay, cool. We also have a lot of things in our group linking to ethics of photos. And also as somebody who works in raptor education and rehabilitation, sometimes I've seen some of these firsthand. So we don't accept things like nest photos because oftentimes when people are photographing raptor nests, it can turn into very stressful situations for those birds where people are getting too close to the nest. They're trying to get birds' attention for good photos, and it can cause a lot of problems. We've seen things like young owls jumping out of their nest because there's too many people around trying to take photos. So in our group, we don't allow those photos just because we don't want to try to promote that sort of activity of people pestering nesting birds in order to get good photographs. Same thing for baiting and baited photos, not trying to set up, unnatural situations or trying to feed birds or mess with, the natural behaviors of birds living out in the wild. Raptors being flushed from perches. This is something that you can see often with, like if there's a rarity in your area, a lot of times there'll be photographers and other people sort of chasing down birds to get good photos of them or getting too close. So we don't want photos of raptors that are obviously being stressed out or chased out of the area by photographers or people who mean well but don't really know necessarily that they're stressing the birds out. We don't want exact locations of breeding or wintering raptors for those same reasons, just because we don't want to basically post, hey, this really cool bird has been seen in this specific area, And that may prompt people to go out in mass numbers and try to find the bird, and that causes a lot of stress too. In general, no harassment of raptors.
Awesome. Thanks so much, Bonnie. I'd like to, our next section here, what would be cool, I thought, to show some of our favorite tips and traps in terms of raptor identification. We get to practice so much, and we would love to share some of our favorites with you. How about Cathy?
So I'm going to try to be quick because we're taking quite a while here. So one of the field marks that often gets posted specifically for red-tailed hawks, and they'll use it as a standalone field mark, is that the bird has a belly band. And this is just a couple of examples of non-red-tailed hawks that show belly bands. And belly bands can be seen on quite a few different species of raptors. So it should never be used as a standalone field mark for red-tailed hawks. So the bird on the left is an adult ferruginous hawk with the big gape, and he kind of is more of a barred type belly band. And I'm not going to tell you the identification of the bird on the right, but take a quick look at it and see if you can come to the correct ID. And Lindsay's going to talk about this bird a little bit later in our talk.
Awesome. One of my favorite ones here is a tip I picked up about northern harriers. A lot of people kind of assume that all brown topped harriers, or as I'm going to call them here, brown type. A lot of folks assume that all brown type harriers are female, but something to keep in mind is that juvenile male northern harrier are also brown type. So one thing that you can use to help differentiate between juvenile brown type harriers and adult female, in addition to the streaks on the lower part of the bird in the breast and the more orangey color in the juveniles, are these undertail covert markings. So I've got it circled here. The adult female has markings on the undertail covert feathers, while juveniles typically don't. So as you're identifying, this is a very tough mark to pick up in the field, but if you've got a good photo, if you want to confirm that your harrier is an adult female, look for that marking on the undertail coverts.
So as we all know, there are a lot of tips and traps when it comes to identifying our accipiters in North America. One that I feel like I see commenters kind of get tripped up on is, oh, it's got a white eyebrow, it's a northern goshawk, which obviously in these pictures you can see juvenile sharp-shinned, juvenile Coopers, and a juvenile northern goshawk all showing this white eyebrow. At all age classes of accipiters in North America, they can show these white eyebrows. So it's another one of those, like, please don't rely on one field mark to make your identification. So yeah, accipiters can be tricky.
Awesome.
Mine is the field mark of feathered legs on raptors, and that can be very misleading, especially to newer people, is that I see a lot of, like, if you look at the red-tailed hawk photo on the bottom, especially if they're standing in the grass and you can't see their entire leg, it looks like, the bird has feathers on their legs, therefore it's a feathered leg raptor. But the term feathered legs really refers to that very bottom bone on their leg right above their feet, their tarsometatarsus, and it's whether that specific part of their leg is covered in feathers or not. So that photo that I have in there is a red-tailed hawk leg and a ferruginous hawk leg, so that you can kind of see the difference between those two. But oftentimes you're not going to be able to see that in photos, or if you see a bird sitting out in the wild, they might have their belly fluff covering the lower part of their legs, or like that red-tailed hawk, that lower part of the bird's legs is hidden in the grass, so you might not be able to see it. But those feathered legs can definitely be very helpful for weeding out certain species when you're trying to identify birds that look like each other, like golden eagles versus juvenile bald eagles, or red-tailed hawks versus ferruginous hawks. Those will definitely help you out if you can see them.
Terrific. All right, let's see. Next up, I wanted to share some of our favorite posts in the group. We've been, some of us in here in the group for 8 years, and some are really memorable posts. There's always something fun that pops up. So I just wanted to give everybody a chance to talk about some of their favorites. We'll start with Bonnie.
Yeah, this is, there's been a lot of really cool ones in the group over the years, but this was a more recent one that I thought was really neat. This bird got posted and the comments section was basically split between, oh yeah, that's definitely a black vulture with those, white wing tips, because that's a typical trait for black vultures. Other people said, no, that looks like a turkey vulture with a weird pigmentation issue. And then some people said hybrid, maybe. But this bird was identified as a turkey vulture with abnormal pigmentation. You can see some of those weird white feathers in the tail even, which is not something you're going to see with a black vulture, as well as that sort of wedge-shaped tail rather than a shorter square-shaped tail that a black vulture would have. And even on those outer primaries that are white, the wings have a different number of white feathers on each one. So things that point to it not being a black vulture.
Awesome. Such a crazy bird.
Yeah.
Great. Here's one that that came through the group via Brian Tinker on a photo from Dean Rushmore. When I first saw this bird, my mind immediately jumped one way. And the question was, is this a rough-legged hawk or is this a Mississippi kite? That's a comparison of species that, talking earlier, we talked about range, expected range and expected timing of migrant birds. There's a very small area in our country in a very small time window where you could actually see both of these species in the same time. And late spring in the Midwest is one of them. So, what is this bird? A little bit obscured by the sticks of clear dark eyeline, dark iris, this sort of mottled gray top and pointy wings. I loved this post because I had never once thought that these two species really looked like each other. But when I looked at this image, boy, it was fun to go through it. And I ultimately thought, hey, this is a Mississippi kite. The great thing about our community is that we got a lot of evidence and a lot of discussion on why it's actually a better fit for rough-legged hawks. So again, just kind of in summary, my favorite thing about the group is sometimes there are two species that aren't really on the top of mind as being really closely creating an ID conundrum, but sometimes you see it in a particular photo and it really kind of expands the mind. So I really love this one from Ohio.
So this was a bird that got posted by Linda. I'm not sure how her last name is pronounced, but Screama. And she does a lot of birding in New York. And this was posted in January 2021. And she posted it saying, is this a really weird red tail? And she gets a lot of northern red tails in her area in wintertime. And as a Western birder, I instantly knew that this was a juvenile ferruginous hawk. But then I went, holy cow, New York, what the heck? And this turned out to be the first record, and it was first identified on our group before it got any replies on, I think she also had posted it to What's This Bird? But it sat about 30 minutes before I saw the post without any identification given on what turned out to be, as I said, a first state record for New York. And then we had to be super careful because we, of course, knew that this was a bird that many, many birders would want to see. But following our group's ethics, we did not allow her to post the location of the bird on our group, but did encourage her to consider, posting it in other places that did allow location. I think quite a few people did get the opportunity to see this first state record for New York, but it was fun for me to be the first person to come in and make the identification on that bird.
So cool. All right. How about Lindsay?
Oh, this one's a fun one. I remember when this came in and I had gotten to it later, so I had seen all the comments, and this was posted by Brian White in November 2019 in Everglades National Park, which has kind of a good mixing of beauteos that can be seen in that area. We've got, red tails, short tails, Swainson's hawks, broadwing hawks, a bunch of different kinds of things. The original poster, I believe, asked if it was a red tail or a short tail, some of the expected. And of course, the first reaction when you look at this is like, oh, it's got a belly band. Oh, it's kind of got like dark-ish looking patagial marks, whatever, banded tail, it's a red tail. And that's what a lot of the comments said. And like I said, I got into it later when I got a message actually from Jerry Liguori letting me know, hey, you've got a post up that's going crazy. Everybody's saying it's a red tail and it's a broadwing. And I went and looked at it and I was like, oh, goodness, you're right. So obviously He pointed out that this bird has 4 fingers, or what some members call emarginated primaries, and that dark subterminal band to the tail, and that this is definitely a broadwing hawk. So this one definitely tripped up a lot of our members, and even some of our well-seasoned members were immediately calling out a broadwing hawk. And that's why, like Cathy said, we don't rely on just the belly band.
Awesome. Good old Jerry. All right, finally, I just wanted to take a few minutes here to talk about some of our favorite parts of participating in the group. For me, Raptor ID is a chance to practice raptors every day and identifying them and reading along with how folks are thinking. It really, in my mind, is one of the best ways to get better. You know, there's so much to learn in birding. There's so much to forget. But with the opportunity to practice every day, I really love that part about the group. Seeing new learners get IDs right and sparking interest is so exciting. And I have to thank Rick because as I was prepping for this presentation, I looked back over the years, and Rick was the one who really kind of took me under his wing to talk about why a particular ID was correct or incorrect. And my excitement in getting it right was very palpable in those posts. And I love that we can, as admins, you know, foster that excitement with new learners. Seeing local birders in my area participate and identify birds on the national, you know, stage is really fun. And of course, working with the team behind the scenes, we have a long-running group chat where we share interesting birds, and this team is always my first ask if there's a bird that I can't figure out.
Same here, Brian. Pretty much anytime I have a question about my own IDs or IDs that I see on eBird, I love having the admin team to be like, hey, am I crazy for thinking this, or am I on the right track? I also really enjoy meeting new Raptor people on our page. We always are having new people posting, and I enjoy seeing their photos and everything like that. I absolutely love being one of the first pages to identify those vagrants that come through. I think it's really, really cool. I think it's a fun opportunity and a fun challenge. I like those challenging IDs that we always get, like the hybrids and out of state stuff. So, and I also, of course, really enjoy being able to share my knowledge with new people and our knowledge collectively. It's really fun for me.
Awesome.
So for me, there's a lot of things that I love. One is just seeing a wide range of different raptor species from North America, different plumages, different molts, et cetera, going on throughout the year. And then occasionally we do get posts from outside of North America, and those are always fun to see as well, even though that's not really our specialty within the group. But sometimes seeing a bird from other parts of the world is kind of fun that I may never see in person, or sometimes I maybe have seen in person. And for me, practicing and improving my own skills and really thinking about how I come to those IDs. When I first, when the group was first started, I was not nearly as confident with all the minutia between Sharpshins and Coopers, but just through immersion of seeing thousands, literally thousands of posts over and over, I feel now much more confident in photos identifying those tricky accipiters. I enjoyed the minutia of the subspecies discussions, which was why the group was originally started. And then obviously, as I said, those are less common now, but I still enjoy them when they do come up. I have an interest in both hybrid birds and also those with abnormal plumage, and I get to see a lot of them that I would never see in real life through just the photos that are posted up by group members. And of course, seeing members learn and improve and mentioning how much they've learned and enjoyed the group, and also seeing those skills that they are gaining by articulating the field marks within our group, then passed on to other groups. I see far more raptor identifications that happen on What's This Bird or Bird ID Please, where the identifier comes in and lists a whole list of field marks when identifying a raptor than I ever do see on other birds that are posted there. And I think that's because a lot of our members cross-post, and they're so used to giving those field marks that they just provide them without really thinking too much, and it creates such a better learning environment. And then, of course, making friends, and I've been fortunate to meet everyone except for Brian that's on our admin team on my various travels over the years. So that's been really fun.
Great. All right. How about Bonnie?
Mine is basically an echo of everybody else's too, but getting to see a wide variety of the photos that people post and getting opportunities for tons of ID practice with field marks, traits, plumage variations, on a whole wide variety of species has been a fantastic way to hone my own skills and learn how to basically articulate those things to other people who are learning too. I've also really enjoyed being able to gain ID skills for raptors that are not local to my area. So here in Colorado, we really don't see things like red-shouldered hawks, and broad-winged hawks only just migrate through twice a year. So getting to have a lot of tips for being able to tell those two apart, even though I never see them here, has been fantastic. I really love getting to share my own personal ID tips and tricks that I've picked up along the way with other people who are learning. And since I work with raptors and do a lot of outreach and education, and I do a lot of volunteer training, I use a lot of these things in the classes that we use to train our volunteers, or in some of our public outreach things that we do too. And then, of course, all of our admin team chats will throw pictures around to each other, or figure out how to handle certain situations that are going on in a group. If, you know, a conversation is getting a little out of hand or something, we work pretty well together on those sorts of things as an admin team.
Excellent. Could not agree more. All right, I'm just going to wrap it up. Just a little thought about what we've learned about Raptor ID and the membership. One thing that Cathy mentioned was the post topics. You can see here's just a screenshot recently. You know, we've got over 1,000 red-tailed hawk IDs and Cooper's hawks and hundreds of red shoulders and Sharpies. So cool to quantify the frequency of the questions that people have. We can learn about, you know, what is really troubling people, compare these numbers to the frequency of the bird in real life. So, you know, no matter what, red-tailed hawk is our #1 most identified raptor. And even the most, you know, notorious, some folks would consider basic raptor in our whole continent is still one that has so much to learn, so much to teach us, and so many identification discussions can come from that bird. Bald eagle's right up there, #6. That's still a difficult ID for folks. A lot of the requests are about aging. I think that's super cool that folks are interested in knowing not just that this is a bald eagle, but, you know, maybe pushing it to the next level. Can we identify the age of that individual? And finally, you know, some folks say things like, "Oh man, it's always a Cooper's hawk. It's never a Sharpie." Well, we can quantify that after 1,500 accipiter posts since we started keeping track, it's about a 3-to-1 Cooper's hawk to Sharpshin hawk ratio. That's for, you know, birds that you can get a photo of. So if anybody out there has tried to photograph a Sharpie, obviously, you know, that can be a little bit tougher. And they're you know, a smaller, quieter, sneakier bird. So that might explain some of that. I'll just leave it with aging and sexing is of interest to our members. We've got, you know, members who are not just looking to identify a bird and kind of leave. It's about how far can we push it? You know, what really makes identification useful and fun? What can I learn about this bird that I'm sharing this special moment with in my picture? So we love helping out with that and love to see folks sharing their moments. Again, if you're not a member, we would love to have you. You can search for Raptor ID in the Facebook search. Again, these slides will be available later. You can click on the link to join, and we would love to see you over there. And,
can I add something really quick? Am I allowed to do that? When you request to join the Raptor ID page, if you guys are not already a part of it, please make sure you answer those entry questions. If those questions are unanswered, we typically just kind of boot it out because oftentimes we get spam. So just saying that.
Bad. All right, that's our presentation. We'll bring Josh back in to moderate our Q&A.
Excellent. Well, thank you so much, all four of you. That was really great. And I couldn't help but thinking and essentially hoping that we had some of your members joining in today, because I think what a great opportunity that would be for them to learn more about not only where your skills and your expertise come from, but also from more of an emotional connection kind of perspective. your interests and what drives you to continue doing what you're doing, and essentially for free and volunteering your expertise and time. So that's so important. So I'm hopeful that we had some of your members on to enjoy what many of our constituents enjoyed today. So thank you very much. In terms of questions, a few comments, lots of raving results, people just thanking you for what you do, and what a great presentation it was. The first one was, I think, for Lindsay, not necessarily a question for you. It was basically about the harpy eagle, I think, that was in your intro photograph. So it's not necessarily a question. They were curious what it was. We've identified that, but maybe you could speak about anything special with that bird that you'd like to share.
Sure. It's actually just it's a bird that resides at World Bird Sanctuary in St. Louis, Missouri. It's actually not a bird I worked directly with. I had left before that bird came into acquisition at the World Bird Sanctuary. I happened to be in town in St. Louis recently, and I asked them if I could get a picture with him because he's very cute. His name's Alejandro, and what an opportunity to get to handle such a magnificent animal. And of course, that's kind of every raptor girl's dreams, is to be in such a proximity with a harpy eagle. So can't say that I ever worked with him. I worked with plenty of other raptors, just not him specifically. So
yeah, very cool. Thank you.
Thanks.
There was a comment earlier on too. Someone commented how much they loved the foundation, where you think in terms of typically, usually, and often. I think that's such an important way to focus how you're responding to not be so off-putting. And one of the things that I really appreciate and try to do is often will tell people what my impression is of what I'm seeing, as opposed to acting like an authority, because I loved what you said, and others agreed about having this, always question, always willing to learn. You can't identify everything. So I just wanted to share that. Someone had asked about the use of subadult, and Cathy answered that. Another comment about loving the ethics and how important that is to drive appropriate behavior, and also loved the comment about, in a lot of cases, I think Bonnie mentioned, it's not necessarily on purpose. It might just be something they're not educated about yet. Lindsay, thank you for identifying the juvenile red-shouldered hawk someone posted. That was really fun. And then one question here, does your team discuss migration routes? They added and commented that they're amazed, for example, that counts on a given day at Cape May differ so greatly at Kiptopeke, even though they seem to fall in the same migration paths.
Yeah, I can talk about that as the probably most closely related to East Coast migration here. It's something that I love to share with our admins is hawk count pages from hawkcount.org, which is the Humana website that tracks daily migration counts. A big flight, I will share that with the group. When I'm on my Hawkwatch sabbatical in September, I love to share my big days with the group to monitor that. And if I can think of certain days that have been so monumental that they've kind of risen to the top of our agendas. I remember in 2021, maybe 2020, there was a huge rough-legged hawk flight, record flight in Duluth at Hawk Ridge. That's something that we talked about. A massive peregrine falcon flight at the Florida Keys Hawkwatch a couple of years ago, and then the huge swallow-tailed kite days. Even in Belize, we had a monumental hook-billed kite. So, big news in the community is something that we definitely talk about. In terms of, the everyday content of the group, we're really focused on identifying birds. And we certainly have plenty of discussions about migration. A lot of folks will give us their anecdotes about, I'm seeing more of this bird at this time of year, or boy, they're missing here. So, we just kind of touch on migration. If anyone wants to discuss migration in a behavioral discussion, we're all for it. And, Humana is definitely the center nexus of all the resources about hawk migration. And we love being adjacent to that.
Yeah, excellent. Thanks, Brian. Another question here. When do you consider location in the ID process?
Ooh, I got this one. I like to talk about this one because, if you see any dark birds posted, you're going to consider, is this posted in Michigan? Is this posted in California? Is this posted in Florida? Because those answers can be wildly different from each one of those. Like if you see a dark bird in Florida, bird being usually buteo, it can be a short-tailed hawk, which a lot of people don't consider because they're from other, states that they don't get short-tailed hawks. Or if you get a dark bird in Southern California, you can consider, the dark westerns that they see, but also like common black hawks, Harris's hawks, vagrant. And then of course up like Michigan, they could have like dark northerns or whatever, red tails. But yeah, location does play a big role. If you post a picture of an accipiter in Florida in the middle of summer, you're probably not going to expect it to be a sharp-shinned hawk. So it's just something to keep in mind along with all the other things in the photo, field marks, etc. So that's my input on that.
But with that said, of course, a ferruginous hawk in New York is still a ferruginous hawk in New York. So
Right.
To me, location is like a useful little bit of information, but the field marks and the actual bird itself are going to come first and foremost. So to
100%.
me, while location is obviously can be a helpful supportive information, like, oh, I should consider short-tailed hawk, and that's going to be much less likely at the dark buteo of Michigan. If all the field marks say this is a short-tailed hawk, and we can support, but we should always think horses before we think zebras, but not completely eliminate zebras from consideration.
Exactly. Zebras don't have wings, so.
Yeah, those are some great points from both of you, Lindsay and Cathy. Thank you for that. I think the last question, and I think immediately, I think it was Cathy and a recent chart with a really wonderful image of a Swainson's hawk. This question is about whether raptors migrate from North America to South America.
Yeah, there's quite a few species that spend part of their year and often breed up here in North America and then either go to Central America or South America. And Swainson's hawks with their extremely long wings and long primaries are one of our longer distance migrants, but there's quite a few different species, including, and I may miss some of them, but broad wings, Mississippi kites, swallow-tailed kites, all go down to either Central America or South America in the winter time and really kind of disappear from our scene. And oftentimes they're kind of replaced by some of those real northern breeders like rough-legged hawks that we don't tend to see very often in the lower 48 that then come down into the lower 48 for winter time.
Mm-hmm.
Can add turkey vulture and osprey as well in terms of, total migrants from North America.
Yep.
And, then they may only go into the northern part of South or Central America, but yeah, they're on the list too.
Yeah, it really just showcases the importance of places like Panama in terms of migration and just the sheer numbers of what you can see there. So if it's something that interests people in terms of where to go in Central or South America, Panama in October is hard to beat for raptor migration. Well, guys, I can't thank you enough for all of your expertise and your willingness to give us your time today. I mean, it's just always such a pleasure to have experts in their fields, and even if it's not a professional field, there are so many experts out there that when you're willing to share that, it means the world. So, on behalf of Humana as well as our other partners, thank you so much. Speaking of Humana, just in terms of where we're going next. December marks kind of an important time to take a break, refresh, reset, and spend time with friends and family. So we're going to do just that. And we're encouraging all of you to take a break as well and refresh. So we're going to take a break next month, but we look forward to seeing you back again in January, where we'll celebrate the new year with another Lunch and Learn. So again, thank you to our speakers. Thank you to everybody for joining, and we look forward to seeing you in January. Have a great rest of your day. Thank you.